Simio is proud to announce their latest software release, Simio 10.174. This video will guide you through all the new and exciting features and enhancements that has been introduced to Simio since the last major release. Separator – buffer logic support for balking and reneging from member output buffer. We added support for balking and reneging from most input and output buffers from within the standard library objects. However, one buffer that this did not include was the member output buffer for the separator object. This object has now been enhanced to include the balking and reneging features as well. New token wait action for create, remove, unbatch, and search steps. The create, remove, unbatch, and search steps all consist of the original or parent token exit from the right of the step, as well as the created, removed, member, and found exit from the bottom of the step. By default, the created, removed, member, and found tokens will exit first and continue until a delay in processing, followed by the original and parent token processing. The use of a delay step with math.epsilon could have been used to change this processing order. These steps now include a token wait action property to help users determine how the tokens exit the step. For compatibility, the default value of this property is new tokens exit first, which allows the tokens to exit and process as they always have. Two additional options are no wait and wait until new token processing completed. No wait indicates that the execution of any new tokens from created, removed, member, and found exit will be scheduled on the simulation's current event calendar as an early priority event, and that the original or parent token will immediately exit the step first. If the action is wait until new token processing completed, the original token will wait until the processing has been completed for all new tokens associated with created, removed, member, and found before exiting. This includes any delay steps of math.epsilon that the new tokens may encounter. Search steps enhancements. Because of feedback from our Simio conference, we have made several other changes to the search step functionality, including 1. The collection type reservation owners is now available to search the list of objects that have currently reserved capacity of a specified resource. 2. If searching table rows, the table row references of the original token are now copied to any new tokens. Search steps and models built prior to Sprint 166 will run as they had and not include this functionality. 3. The search types forward and backward no longer sum a specified search expression. Those search types are now simply for the most common use case of searching a collection of objects or rows of a table with an optional match condition. This simplifies the default presentation of the search steps properties by no longer showing search expression. New forward sum expression and backward sum expression search types are now provided if the expression summing behavior is desired. Search steps added prior to Sprint 166 will now have forward sum expression instead of forward and backward sum expression instead of backward for compatibility reasons. 4. In conjunction with the above change, a new save search expression sum property is now provided along with the search expression property if the search type is minimize expression, maximize expression, forward sum expression, or backward sum expression. This new approach was done to make it easier for users to both understand step behavior as well as to avoid unit conversion mistakes because we can save the search expression sum in a state variable of some unit type. 5. The limit property has been moved from the advanced options section of properties to the basic logic section of properties, as requested by several users. 6. While making the other enhancements in this list, a small performance improvement in the code was identified if searching table rows. Simple test models run about 5 to 6% faster after the change. Routing group element on confirming destination node assignment process. Within the advanced options of the routing group element, we have added a new process that may be called on confirming destination node assignment process. This was a user-requested feature. When using a dynamic selection rule, the existing on-evaluating route request process is executed for every possible entity and destination node combination to filter the list of possible destination node assignments. The best destination node assignment from the candidates that made it through the filtering is then selected per the specified rule. The new on-confirming destination node assignment process, on the other hand, is only executed whenever a destination node assignment has been selected to confirm it. If this decision process returns false, then the routing group goes back to the drawing board and, using the same dynamic selection rule again, looking for the next best entity and node combination, which would then have to be confirmed, and so forth. Suspend and resume steps. Enhancement. Both the suspend and resume steps now allow the ability to suspend and resume batching done within a batch logic element. The suspend type and resume type properties on these steps now include the option for batch logic. Standard library combiner. New suspend batching when down property. There is a new property for the combiner object within the standard library, within the batching logic section of properties. When the suspend batching when down is set to true, the actual collection of batches will be stopped if the combiner has failed or changes capacity to 0 from a work schedule shift change. This means that the parent and member entities will reside in the input queues of the combiner and not attempt batching. If this new property is set to false, parent and member entities will continue the batching process and will be removed from the parent and member input queues, but will not move through the combiner object until the failure is repaired or work schedule changes. Note: the default value of this property is true for new models, but false if updating an old model, as that was the implicit setting in the previous object versions. Model properties and compatibility. Parse non-entity associated objects for property reference. Within a model's property window, under the Advanced Options and Compatibility section of Properties, we have added a Parse non-entity associated objects for property reference property. In models built in Sprint 166 and prior, this value will implicitly be set to false. This was a user-requested issue that changed previous software behavior. Now, within 167+, an object, such as a custom server named myServer for example, may have a property, such as a table type property named myTable, that can be referenced within the main model when that object is placed. A setRow step may reference myServe.myTable as the table name property to set a particular table, based on the associated object myServer's property value for myTable, row reference for any of the myServer objects placed in a model. Simio file, settings, graphics, DirectX 11, anti-aliasing, and hardware skeletal animation support. There are now a few new options in the File Settings dialog related to graphics. 1. An expanded set of options for the graphics type. Note that DirectX or Software DirectX currently actually mean DirectX 9. Users also can explicitly say which DirectX they want. 2. A new anti-aliasing support option. When auto is selected, it will be enabled for DirectX 11 and disabled for everything else. 3. A new hardware skeletal animation option. When in auto mode, will be enabled by default for DirectX 11, disabled for others. Resource type objects. Log resource usage property enhancement. Within any resource type of object, such as server, worker, vehicle, etc., there is a log resource usage property under the Advanced Options section of Properties. This Boolean true or false property can now be mapped to a model property. This is useful if you want to, for example, set up different groupings of resources that can be selectively included in the resource Gantt by toggling a single property on the model. Entity Workflow Gantt Enhancement, Enterprise Edition. In September 2017, we made some changes to the Entity Workflow Gantt to allow for task categorization using task group and task row within the Gantt ribbon. Now, we've added a different type of categorization within the main entity portion of the Gantt to allow for additional categorization as well. The new Owner Row option within the Gantt ribbon allows the user to split out the main time items into sub-rows under the main row. The default entity Gantt for a given order, which may consist of a quantity of entity items. Users can now specify a resource usage log custom column for Owner Row that will generate sub-rows based on the column information. The item or entity within the order is used as the Owner Row. This feature is especially useful for entities that have multiple components of processing occurring at the same time with multiple workers and resources also allocated at that location. The location itself can then Task Log and Gantt Enhancements, Task State, Enterprise Edition. We have added a task state log and incorporated the information to the task ID field within the task log. There are now 3 possible task states in the log and associated Gantt. 1. Executing. The task was executing, incurring the specified processing time, solid. 2. Constrained. An active constraint was holding up execution of the task, for example, waiting time for a secondary resource or some material, empty. 3. Suspended. The execution of the task was suspended. This will happen if the primary resource or a secondary resource goes off shift, and the off shift rule is suspend processing. Hatched. Task sequence element enhancement. Loopback branches. We've enhanced the task sequences element to include a repeating property editor of loopback branches. This will allow for users to include conditional and/or probabilistic looping within a task sequence. After task 3, 50% of the entities will loop back to task 2 and continue processing through the task sequence again. After task 4, 25% of the entities will loop back to task 2 and continue processing through the task sequence again. Server, Combiner, and Separator Loopback Branches Enhancements. With the addition of the loopback branches to the task sequence element, these same enhancements have been made to the server, combiner, and separator. All these objects currently include the task sequence option for specifying processing information. If the object's processing type is set to task sequence, and there are 1 or more entries in the processing task's repeating editor, the loopback branches option will be shown. Server, Combiner, and Separator Task Sequence Process Type Enhancements. A state assignment's property category is now available for an individual processing task within the task sequence processing of a server, combiner, or separator. This will allow users to make changes to state variables within the repeatable property editor instead of going through an add-on process. State assignments can be made when the task is ready to begin, not yet seizing resources or consuming materials, starting the task, resources and materials available, task delay about to start, or completed. Breakpoints Enhancement. There is a new setting in the File Settings dialog, defaulted to false, opting everyone into perfect breakpoints. We have had several instances where users' models behaved slightly differently if a breakpoint was set than if it wasn't set, and have therefore added this feature. Task State Log, Entity ID, and Entity. We've enhanced the task state log to include 2 new columns including the entity ID and entity. These fields were added to provide better dashboard support between various logs. Create object from this. Enhancement. We added a right-click option for objects that created a new subclassed object with the object instance property values. We have now added a second right-click option which will only be seen for objects that were originally created from the Create Object from this. It appears that the object instance you opened it on has its object or model in the current project. Clicking it will update the property defaults on the object or model, and the defaults for any associated nodes, as well as update the property values any existing objects who hold values equal to the previous default to the new default. It will not update any graphical symbols or graphical property options. Update to 3D Trimble Warehouse Importing. Based on changes that Trimble 3D Warehouse has recently made, we have had to modify our interface to that application. Now, when a symbol will be added or modified, there is an option to go to 3D Warehouse. Prior was named Download Symbol. This button will put the user in a web browser for 3D Warehouse, where they can search for symbols and download to a SketchUp file. SketchUp files can then be imported using the Import Symbol button. Transfer Node, Entity Destination Type. We have added an option to the Entity Destination Type property within the Transfer Node object, and all fixed objects that contain Transfer Node. The user now has the option upon leaving a Transfer Node to destroy the entity. The new options is None, Destroy Entity. Auto-creation of objects, Enhancement. When using a table to auto-create object instances, users can now specify each object's initial object offset coordinates using geographic values. Object Property has a new location type option to indicate if it uses Cartesian, X, Y, Z, or geographic, latitude, longitude, elevation coordinates. Selecting the default value of Cartesian allows users to enter expressions for x, y, and z, which is existing behavior. Selecting the new value of geographic allows users to enter expressions for latitude, -90 to +90, longitude, -180 to +180, and elevation, in meters, which is just like the existing y Cartesian coordinate, but available here for completeness. Like the x, y, and z values, the new latitude, longitude, and elevation values can optionally be specified as table columns and will take their values from the corresponding row in the table. Object instances created using geographic coordinates will remain at those coordinates even if the facility window's map location origin is changed. New SymBits. We have added several new SymBits during this release. Displaying entity dynamic status information. The SymBit displays multiple label types, dynamic label text as well as status label, that can be attached to an entity as it moves through the system. The example shows multiple lines of data for the entities and uses both strings and string functions to display the information. Simple Worker Pool demonstrates how to incorporate individual worker walking speed and efficiency based on worker selection. Complex Worker Pool demonstrates how to incorporate worker skill level or ability to work at particular servers. The selection of the worker from a pool list is based on efficiency factor. Dashboards for scheduling examples. This model demonstrates how to show results in graphical format using dashboards with an enterprise version. The model is based on the scheduling discrete part production example. Dashboard report tallies. This model has been modified to include logging for all part type tallies and includes all entity tallies within the dashboard. The dashboard has also been enhanced to include 3 different sections of displaying information. Combine multiple parts task sequence. This model demonstrates how to batch different entities types together for subsequent processing using the combiner's task sequence. Each task batches a different entity type or quantity and uses a string value to match the member to the task. Thank you for choosing Simio. To view the full release notes, please visit the Release Notes section under our Resources tab on simio.com.